Hello, Evan.
Hey, Omri, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's amazing. I can't believe we're doing this.
This is just fantastic. It's definitely a big change of pace for both of us.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I never believed I would ever do a podcast. But before we introduce ourselves and tell our audience who we are, what are we actually doing here?
I think what we're doing here is a short form podcast where we're hoping to introduce the most interesting players in the data landscape and educate people about different perspectives in the data world and just talk about data in the most novel and interesting ways.
Right. Essentially, it's about the people and about insights from data. It's about how you connect those and how we can improve the ecosystem. So, Evan, let's start. Who are you?
All right. Well, I guess I'll start out by giving my background and how I ended up in the data world and what the data world kind of means to me. So, I actually started my career as an academic game theorist. So, I was modeling small group decision dynamics and trying to understand how those decision dynamics ultimately influence outcomes. So, during the financial crisis, I decided that the most interesting small group of decision makers in the world was the Federal Reserve. And so I set out to model how the Fed makes decisions and how those decisions affect financial markets. One thing led to another. I realized that there were only a few dozen people in the world who were nerdy game theorists like me and cared about their internal decision dynamics. But what markets cared about, what most people in sort of the financial world care about, is not even central bank policy, but actually communication and how do central bankers communicate. And so I delved into natural language processing and developed a novel methodology to mathematically map linguistic patterns and tie them to price action. This became the basis for not only my academic research, but once I finished my PhD and went off to go look at the next phase of my career, I ended up taking that core methodology and starting a company called Prattle in 2014. And that was an early wave of natural language processing, certainly pre GPT, pre large language models, and we had to do everything by hand. We were using our unique methodology to score central bank communications. And ultimately, we scaled into being able to analyze corporate communications. So earnings calls, regulatory filings, speeches by corporate officers, press releases, et cetera. Um, but all the while, I found myself constantly educating the data consumers, the buy side especially, but also the sell side too, and really found myself in this unique position of in 2014, the term alternative data didn't exist. By 2017, when we launched our equities analytics product at Prattle, the alternative data ecosystem had really taken off. And so I kind of caught the right timing to understand the growth and really explosion in growth in the data landscape. And by the time we sold Prattle in 2019, the world of natural language processing had changed enormously, but so had the alternative data world narrowly and the data landscape much more broadly. We had investor relations officers coming in. They were our fastest growing client demographic when we sold to the company. IROs were not a data driven discipline 5 years earlier. Right. And so I've had a front row seat to the evolution of the data landscape for better part of a decade now. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to connect with a lot of leaders in the data space over those years. And now I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of those people who've become my friends and use this podcast as a format to introduce the world to a lot of their unique perspectives in the data world. And I'm very, very grateful for the fact that, after I left LiquidNet in 2020 post acquisition, I found myself advising some early stage startups and connecting with the most promising entrepreneurs in the space. And a mutual friend connected Omri and I. And one thing led to another. I became an advisor to Lagoon and just extremely impressed with everything that you've been able to build and, been really happy to get to do this with you and really take this opportunity to use IC data people to introduce the world to a lot of our friends, our colleagues, and really the most interesting people in the data world.
I 100% agree. And 3 years ago, I would understand about 5% of what you just said, of your background, what you did, what you're doing, and all those different phrases and sentences and topics. And I think it took me such a long time to learn all those because there was no really one central source. There was no digestible format. I was 12 years in the Israeli Air Force, where I worked a lot with data, really unstructured, really interesting types of different data sources, really scrappy as well. We need to come up with smart way to use it, to implement this into our systems. Also, not a lot of budget and not a lot of resources. So it was a very interesting time to get into the data landscape from a whole different perspective. I did not know anything about the capital markets, anything about the financial markets. And we started Lagoon in 2020, really the height of COVID. It was literally the first quarantine that I quit the army and started the Lagoon. So it was a very interesting time in the financial markets as well. And we saw a huge opportunity in learning and understanding what really moves companies, what really is the business model. What are people saying? What are people thinking? What are people using in order to understand the company? And it always surprised me that it comes up every quarter. People understand the company once a quarter, a month and a half after the quarter ends. Just doesn't make sense. There's real time data to really make sense of the world that we live in, of the companies that we want to invest in, we want to promote, that we want them to be successful. And that's why we invest. We don't invest only to make money. We also invest in things we believe in. But I found it hard to understand. So we started going really the promise to bring those alternative data sources into one place that allowed every investor, anyone, from myself to the pension funds to the big hedge funds, to really make sense of the data and know what they're investing in, know how to make smarter decisions. And during this process, I was introduced to a lot of people, which were amazing in helping me understand what I needed to do, what I needed in order to make this vision. And Evan, this is, for example, where we met, and I listened to almost every advice that you gave me since the time you became one of our advisors. And I never envisioned we'll end up at a podcast, but I think it was a super interesting times to learn, understand, and this market really accelerated in the last few years. We can see it by the number of data providers, by the number of data strategists working in asset managers at this point in time. Some of them, are just starting their roles, which is quite amazing. I recently joined SimilarWeb, which is literally the biggest alternative data company in this space right now. And what really amazed me is the breadth and the depth of the data available at SimilarWeb. And it's not only one data, it's actually a wide variety of data set that engulf and really tell the story of the digital measure of a company, how you understand the business, how you understand the company, their competitor, the market. And it's quite amazing to see it that you can make so many smarter decisions by using this data. So it's really fun to start and make this much more accessible to everyone. And by building this podcast, this network, and really allowing people to create insights from our network, this is quite amazing. And this is also why we call it IC Data People, because it's all about the people.
So I spent a lot of my time talking to the most interesting, most promising data companies, alternative data companies, traditional data companies, helping them commercialize their data. My consulting business, Outrigger, we support a lot of these young companies and even some of the more mature ones in doing this. And in all those conversations, I find myself having the same talk track over and over again, or introducing a lot of these folks to the same people over and over again. And I think for me, that's been a big impetus for this podcast is introducing folks to a lot of this network, a lot of this advice all at once. And Maria, I know you've got a lot of thoughts about why this podcast.
So, Evan, yes, it's about, in my opinion, fun, fear, and learning from experience. So the fun part is about the people, meeting amazing people who have such an interesting experience, such an interesting thoughts and processes set in place that other people don't understand, other people want to understand, other people want to learn from. This space incorporates academia, directors, data scientists, Air Force, software engineers from IBM, and data scientists who came straight from MIT. So this is a very diverse and interesting, innovative ecosystem that I think could learn a lot from talking and speaking to each other and opening it up. So that's a fun part. The second one is fear, where I don't like podcasts. I never imagined myself actually speaking at a podcast, and I have a fear of it. So one of the biggest thing is the challenge for me to actually open up and speak and make this insightful. The last thing is the biggest takeaway from Lagoon, from my startup, is the amazing network and give first attitude of everybody in this ecosystem. and it's not utilized enough. So I want to pay this forward. I met so many people who just helped me for fun, for advice, for, I don't know. And I want to pay this forward and make everybody understand and learn and create insights that are digestible, short, and interesting.
And in the interest of being the best citizens of our respective networks and the new IC Data People network, please, anybody who's interested in being a guest on IC Data People or knows folks who they think would be the ideal guests, we're always open to suggestions. Please reach out to us. We're very eager to hear new voices and step outside of our existing networks and really just experience the world through their eyes and experience the data they're seeing that's most interesting.
Definitely. We're always open to it. And Evan, what's up with the name?
I see data people. Anytime you get to have a veiled reference to a 1990s Bruce Willis movie, I feel like that's just a win. You got to take that opportunity. And that's really there was the impetus for it was we wanted to be able to talk about seeing data insights and bringing in the right people. And I think that the name encapsulates that.
100% agree. And trying to even be more philosophical here, it's about seeing the ghosts, same as like the movie where you want to help them out. And the ghosts are the people who have never talked, who have never shared their experience, who might have a lot of insights and a huge story behind them. This could be so interesting and so insightful for many people. It's about how do we price data? How do we create insights? How do we build those products? Where's the painful parts of this industry and the challenges that we can really shed light upon and solve a lot of people's problems and make this ecosystem much, much stronger. So in the end, again, it's about the people and their experience and the stories, and for the rest of us to learn from them. And what's the format, Evan?
We decided to go with a short form podcast for a few reasons. The first one is we're both busy. And we imagine that most of our listeners are going to be busy people who may not have 45 minutes or an hour to devote to another podcast every week. But carving out 10 or 15 minutes once a week to hear the latest insights from a leader in the data industry, that's something not only do we want to do, that's something we're proactively seeking. And so really keeping to a short format, keeping it tight to a few really insightful questions, and kind of queuing closely to some formats from known talk shows that are really good at interviewing celebrities and getting those folks to really disclose who they are and how they view the world. We've tried to echo that with IC Data People and really get some people to open up and share their most insightful thoughts in just 10 or 15 minutes.
This is going to be fun. Thank you, Evan, so much for all your time, all your help in getting this done. And I'm really excited to go ahead and start this journey with you. So first of all, thank you for being this partner.
Omri, and thank you for being the one who pitched this idea to me initially. I think I only had two conditions, one of which was that I wanted to work with you specifically. You're a fantastic partner, and I very much value your thoughts, your opinions, and how you've approached all of this. And the second one was it had to be a short form podcast. I couldn't bring myself to sit here for 45 minutes or an hour and force people to listen to me talk for that long. So, hopefully this format resonates with our audience, and look forward to doing this for hopefully years to come.
We also want to thank our sponsor, my employer, SimilarWeb, powering this podcast and letting us work independently. And for those of you who don't know what SimilarWeb is from my perspective at least, SimilarWeb has created the most interesting alternative data set measuring the digital world, really the widest breadth, the widest depth of a data set that really covers the entire world. So it's quite an amazing company to be in, work in, and super interesting insights every day. So I love it. And web traffic is actually only the tip of the iceberg. So thank you.
And thank you so much to the clients and other companies that I advise. And many of our guests on the show have come from a network of folks who I've been fortunate enough to work with through Outrigger Group and through my advisory work. I really, most importantly, Omri and I are not the stars of the show here. Our guests are. And so we thank each and every one of them. And as we've said before, please, if folks have interesting guests with unique perspectives on the data world that they think we should be interviewing, definitely reach out to us. We're always eager to meet new faces and get their opinions. So thank you so much to our listeners as well.
Evan, this is awesome. Let's go.
Let's go.